Sup my dudes, Valk here, and today I want to talk to you about how my favorite robot, Mr. Svarog, came with a small child. And that small child is Clara, and Clara is actually incredibly busted, one of the strongest units in the game in my opinion, one of the best 5 stars you can get off channel, our standard banner I guess. And I'm going to talk about what makes her really broken. I'm going to talk about a full ultimate guide for Clara. A full guide so we can all go ahead and have really strong Claras. I'm going to tell you guys what my plans are with her. Basically what I plan to do with her, what light cones I think are best, what good 4-star options. There's really only one good 4-star option. But the good 4-star option, and then obviously talk about the 5 stars, which I feel like is very obvious. Talk about the relics, talk about everything in this general guide. Anyways, let's go ahead, let's get into it. So the very first thing you guys need to know is aggro, base aggro, and how aggro works. The only thing that really matters here is knowing that Hunt has the lowest aggro, while Destruction and Preservation have the highest. Destruction characters have a base aggro value of 125. No, you cannot find this number in the game. Preservation characters have a base aggro value of 150. Whenever you use Clara's technique to start a battle, the base aggro value for Clara goes up by 500%. Whenever you ultimate with Clara, the number goes up by plus 500%. So you have a giga high aggro value whenever you're Clara and you use technique to enter battle and you use her ultimate. And she has a naturally high base aggro value at 195. She's also probably one of the slowest characters in the game at a base speed of 90, and it's for good reason. Slow is good with Clara. You want to be slow with this character. But let's go ahead, let's get into the kit. Let's talk about how everything works. So first off is the talent. Because we're family. Under the protection of Svarog, damage taken by Clara when hit by enemy attacks is reduced by 10%. Svarog will mark enemies who attack Clara with his mark of counter and retaliate with a counter, dealing physical damage equal to 1/12 of Clara's attack. And as you get your traces, you get more things unlocked to it, to where you increase the counter damage by 30%. When attacked, this character has a 35% fixed chance to remove a debuff placed on him. Under protection, the chance to resist crowd control debuffs increases by 35%. So she can self-cleanse, she can resist, and she gets 30% extra damage through her chases alone. And whenever you have an enemy marked with a mark of counter, whenever you use the AoE skill, the damage of the AoE skill doubles. So if you have a bunch of counters on a bunch of enemies, you can actually cash in on the mark of counters. You know it's a mark of counter by the little triangle sign, circle triangle sign over their head. Whenever you go to activate the skill, it will let you know if you have counters on them. Then we get into her ultimate. After Clara uses ultimate, damage dealt to her is reduced by an extra 19%, and she has a greatly increased chance of being attacked by enemies for 2 turns. This is the plus 500% I talked about earlier. In addition, Svarog's counter is enhanced. When an ally is attacked, Svarog immediately launches a counter and its damage multiplier against the enemy increases by 121%. It increases, so it's additive to the already number that's there, which is why she hits so damn hard. Enemies adjacent to it take 50% of the damage dealt to the target enemy. Enhanced counter can take effect 2 times. The reason she hits very, very hard whenever you see it, whenever there's 3 enemies, because it bounces to adjacent enemies, and because the multiplier is additive to the talent multiplier, meaning it can go very, very high. So let's go ahead, let's get into the light cones. Now, the first light cone obviously is something irreplaceable. It is her light cone. Her light cone is insanely strong. Obviously, it's really, really good. I don't think I need to tell you that her light cone is her best in slot. But let's go ahead and let's go into a more free-to-play option. Let's talk about the 4-star A Secret Vow. At Superimpose 1, increases damage dealt by the wearer by 20%. The wearer also deals an extra 20% of damage to enemies with a higher HP percentage than the wearer, which more often than not, this happens against like trash ads or just like mobs you need to clear out quickly with Clara's AoE, but it's not really going to happen too much against elites because the elites are going to target Clara and odds are hit her pretty hard, to where the elites are mostly going to have generally higher HP than you, unless you manage to get them lower. Once you start scaling like that, then you'll get the extra 20% damage and double the bonus that you get from this light cone. So now let's go ahead and let's talk about the one from the Herta store. We're going to be talking about it at Superimpose 5 simply because by the time you finish all the worlds, you are going to be able to Superimpose 5 all the weapons inside the Herta store, which is really, really nice. But whenever the wearer attacks their attack, is increased by 16% in this battle up to 4 times. Clara attacks constantly as long as she's getting hit. When this wearer inflicts weakness break on enemies, the wearer's damage is increased by 24% for 2 turns. That's pretty good. Ends up being a ton of attack, ends up being good damage percent increase. It's really, really good, and it has very high base stats, and you can easily superimpose at 5, completely free to play. Once we unlock all the worlds, and once you complete all the difficulties for all the worlds, you'll be able to max impose every last one of the weapons inside the Herta shop, which it makes sense to do that rather than just get one single summon. Just superimpose all the weapons before you start going for the Starrail passes. So that's really it for all of her light cones. There's not a whole lot going on with all of her light cones. It's mostly, you don't really have a bunch of options. You have the 1 4-star, then you have those options. If you don't have anything, if you don't have either of those 3, which I don't know how you don't have the Herta store weapon, it's free. But if you don't have the Herta store weapon now, try to get it in the future, and that should be the option you use. But if you have the 4-star, the 4-star is genuinely a pretty good option too. Now I want to talk about the relics. The relic set, obviously you have to go with the physical damage set. It's literally like it's made for her. After the wearer attacks or is hit, their attack increases by 5% for the rest of battle. This effect can stack up to 5 times, 25% more attack, 10% more physical damage. Insanely good, no brainer. And then for the planner set, it's even more no brainer. The inert Solsado set increases the wearer's crit rate by 8%. When the wearer's current crit rate reaches 50% or higher, the wearer's ultimate and follow-up attack damage increases by 15%. What this means essentially is, if you don't know, Clara's counterattacks count as follow-up attacks. It's how I did that little trick in the intro, and I made her hit for 40k and 30k, is by going into Simulated Universe and running all sorts of follow-up attack buffs to the point where her counterattack is hitting super hard. She still hits really hard, but 40k and 30k is a little egregious. So you can expect some pretty good damage through this set. This is going to buff her directly, and it increases crit rate by 8%, so you don't have to focus so much on the crit rate. It's just all in all a really good planner set, especially for Clara. Next, when it comes to team building, I want to talk about synergies with specific characters and talk about who's her best friend, who's her worst enemy to come on the same team. And some of this might surprise some of you guys, but some of it definitely won't. So first off, we have March, and the sole reason we have March is for this shield. The shield, whenever you have the trace, you can actually go ahead and make it remove a buff, so it functions as a cleanse, which is really good for Clara. It can provide a single ally with a shield that can absorb damage equal to 45% of March's defense if the ally's current HP is 30% or higher. Greatly increases the chance of enemies attacking that ally. What that means is that base aggro value that we talked about earlier, the fact that Clara can give herself plus 1000%, this gives plus 500% aggro value to whoever you put the shield on. Meaning they're probably going to get hit whenever you put this shield on them, which is ideal for Clara, because not only does she have protection through the shield, but now she can get targeted, and she can dish out a lot of damage through her counters via March. Next up is Ting Yong. Ting Yong, because one, her skill will increase Clara's attack, which is really nice. But the most important part is her ultimate regenerates 50 energy for a single ally and increases the target's damage by 20% for 2 turns. The main thing is the damage percent increase, which is really good for Clara because she already has a bunch of attack buffing stuff going for her. Most destruction characters do naturally. And you get the 50 energy, so you can go ahead and keep that ult having higher uptime, because the ultimate lasts for 2 turns. You want to try to increase the uptime as much as possible, so Ting Yong just helps that out a lot. Depends on your team if you have space for Ting Yong, but March 7th or Ting Yong are 2 really good characters to keep in mind whenever you're building a team for Clara. Another character that synergizes pretty well with Clara is Yanqing. Yanqing synergizes pretty well with Clara simply because whenever he activates his stance, he reduces his aggro value by 50% and allows Clara, who has tons of natural aggro value, to go ahead and get the spotlight and get hit way more often. And that's really good, because the more often your Clara gets hit, she's going to be able to counterattack more often. So Yanqing can be left alone to sit inside of his stance and be able to deal a ton of damage that way with follow-ups and lots of constant hits. And Clara can get lots of counters because she's the one getting hit, which is what you want. You want Clara to get hit because then she can counter and do tons of damage. And now for anti-synergies. Characters you want to avoid running with Clara simply because she just does not function well with them. First, we're going to get into good old Gepard. Gepard just doesn't function well with Clara because he naturally draws aggro. Here you can see through his first trace, it just straight up increases his aggro chance Japard has a higher chance to be attacked by enemies. And then if you manage to get his 5-star light cone and put it on him, it increases it even higher, to the point where you are not going to be able to actually get your Clara to get attacked simply because you have Japard on the same team as Clara and you're pulling away from potential damage as Clara, because you want people to hit the child. That way the angry robot comes out and does a ton of damage. So the next one will actually shock a lot of people, and that's Bronya. I think Bronya has anti-synergy with Clara simply because Bronya wants to give Clara extra turns, and Clara, whenever she's taking her turn, most times is going to do a normal attack. She's really good for, Clara is very good for skill point generation simply because she wants a normal attack and do most of her damage off of her turn, and she doesn't want to actually take a lot of turns. She kind of wants to be functioning in the background. You kind of set her up with March, or you put some way to draw aggro to Clara, and then you just leave her alone. Bronya, even though she has a debuff, even though she has damage percent increase, even though she has crit rate, crit damage, all sorts of bonuses, well not crit rate, but crit damage bonus, increases attack to all allies, etc., is very anti-synergist with Clara, simply because if she's going to cleanse Clara, she's going to buff Clara, she's going to give Clara an extra turn. And I'm going to be real with you, unless you are max cashing in Mark of counter stacks, you're not going to do a lot of damage on Clara's turn. Most of her damage comes from off her turn, whenever she's getting hit by enemies, whenever she's getting hit by AoEs, whenever she's getting hit and doing lots of counters, that's where her damage comes through. It's not from her actually taking actions. And then the last character that's very anti-synergist with Clara is going to go ahead and be the MC. And the reason the MC goes ahead and is very anti-synergist with Clara, simply because the MC taunts everybody and is going to draw a lot of aggro to themselves. And that's not good because you want Clara to get attacked. So this is one of the things that you kind of have to watch out for, because it just doesn't work very well with Clara. So next up is your team placement. Now whenever you're making a team with Clara, you're always going to want to put Clara and March on one side all on their own, because March naturally has a ton of defense, so she can take a lot of hits. She's not going to take a lot of damage because her defense is so high, and you can put her next to Clara, so whenever Clara gets targeted for AoE abilities that hit adjacent allies, it's just going to hit March, and it's not that big a deal. Then you want to put your healer and your single target completely on the other side, with your single target damage dealer being on the complete outside. That way, once again, if they're getting hit by adjacent enemies, they're less likely to get hit. So you're less likely for your single target damage dealer to take a lot of damage. You're less likely for your healer to take a lot of damage, although normally it's fine for the healers to take damage because a lot of them build HP, so it's not a very big deal if they take damage because they can just heal it back up. But then you have your two tankiest characters together in one side, one corner of the team themselves, so they're not getting hit by, or so they're attracting all the attacks and not letting the rest of your team get hit by adjacent attacks. So now that we've gone over team building, everything else, let's go ahead, let's list the pros and cons of using Clara. She hits very hard in an AoE. She can pull aggro value off of your main damage dealer, so she can constantly draw aggro value, so she functions effectively as a tank and a damage dealer in the exact same sequence. And she has good self-energy generation due to the sheer amount of attacks she does per turn, with them all being pretty much AoE. It's generally really good. And she excels in in-game content. She absolutely blasts in-game content wide open, simply because the longer things take, the more turns something takes, the more value she's going to get out of that counter. Now, the cons to Clara. There are some good cons, some pretty big ones. One, she has a lot of anti-synergies simply because she functions very uniquely, and you're going to want to try to play around the way she functions to maximize the value out of her. And two, due to poor timing or toughness breaking, due to weakness break, or due to CC, whatever happens, you can and you will waste Clara's ult at times. It just happens. It happens to the best of us. It's something that's going to consistently happen as you play her, but it's something that you'll get better with and something that I'm still improving with. That way you can better time your ult usages as Clara to get maximum value out of it, to make sure you are getting those counters off. And then finally, there are some enemies that just don't attack a lot. And if an enemy does not attack a lot, you're not going to get a lot of value out of Clara. It's plain simple. Some enemies are all about, some elites are all about buffing up other mobs that they're with and trying to do that. And those enemies, whenever you go ahead and clear all the ads, Clara becomes pretty rough and draws the fight down to a basic standstill, because you need Clara to get countered to actually, or you need Clara to get hit, and you need to counter to actually deal any sort of meaningful damage. Meanwhile, the fight itself, it's still taking forever because they just don't attack that often. So all in all, I think Clara is absolutely amazing. I think she's a fantastic damage dealer. I think she has some major weaknesses, but whenever you play into her strengths, dear God, does she just blow everything up. Everything just explodes simply because Mr. Svarog is that much of a Giga Chad, a badass. He just is going to explode everything, and the entire character, the kit, I love everything about it. I think it's super sick. And if you guys ever manage to get her, or you already have her, build her, give her a shot, try her with the relics, the teams, and try her with everything that I said in the showcase, or in this guide video, the ultimate guide. Go ahead, try it with her, because simply she is just that good. She has carried me through the majority of the game. She enables all sorts of funny cheeses. She's just a really, really good character, and I suggest trying her out. Anyways, thank you guys for watching as always. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.